been the youth minister here for 3 years. And during that 3 years, I've got an opportunity to get to know a lot of you, and you've gotten an opportunity to get to know me. I wonder, though, how many of you know what I did before I became the youth minister here at Rockwood United Methodist Church? Like, did you know that I used to own a quilt store? And apparently I had really bad hair. So I cut it, so it was a good idea. And before that, I was an EMT firefighter, and I was also a 911 dispatcher for Brevard County Fire Rescue. That was a lot of fun. And I know that there's a lot of you who probably know those things about me, but did you know that I actually graduated from 8th grade at Catholic school? That's Father Cronin giving me my diploma. And in the corner, that's me on number 11. We look pretty vicious for a bunch of Catholic girls, don't we? So now that you know a little bit more about me, did you know that when I first spoke to Ted about preaching, he came to me one Wednesday in a meeting and said, you know, it's probably a really good idea if you had a sermon stuck in your Bible just in case there was an emergency and you had to preach. When I first got my job here, that was one of the things I told him unequivocally that I would not do. I will not preach. So I remember calmly looking at him and saying, is this your polite way of asking for my resignation? And he said no. He said, it's just probably a really good idea. And over time, the idea and God kind of worked in me. And most of you know by now, it's been plastered everywhere that I'm actually graduating from the Youth Ministry Institute next Saturday. And thank you to Kathy, my coach, for being here to rally me on for my first preaching experience. I appreciate your being here and everything that you and YMI have done for me, because that's why I'm here. But sometimes we think we know people when we actually know very little about them. And Jesus had the same problem with his disciples. They would see him do things, and they were amazing things, and they thought that they knew him. They would know exactly what he was capable of, and then 5 minutes later, they would forget. And we all do that, don't we? We see what God can do, and we marvel in it for a little while, and then life happens, and we get distracted by our jobs and our families, and we forget. Until the next amazing thing happens. You guys know who this guy is, I'm sure. It's Tim Tebow. We know things about him. You probably know he's a missionary's kid. He had his first preaching experience when he was 15 years old in the Philippines with his father. You've heard people that know him talk about how extreme his faith is and how he has that faith even when the cameras are turned off and the reporters have all gone home. But what do you know about this guy? That's Ben Roethlisberger. Did you know that he had a brush with NFL enforcers over the PFJ, which stood for Pray for Jesus, that he had painted on his cleats in his rookie year? Did you know that in a pre-Super Bowl interview in 2005, he said, you don't have to listen to what I have to say, but I will always have the opportunity to glorify God in all I do. This guy knew Jesus, and he knew what his faith looked like, and he wanted everyone else to know too, but he forgot. 3 short years later, in 2008, there were allegations of sexual assault in Lake Tahoe. And in 2010, more allegations of sexual assault in Milledgeville, Georgia. Neither allegation resulted in charges being filed. However, the Georgia incident did result in Roethlisberger being suspended under the NFL's personal conduct policy from the start of the 2010 season. Now, at the time of the allegations, a lot of people said that Roethlisberger was arrogant. He was anything but the picture of this Christian that he was in 2005. And nobody would have blamed the Steelers for firing him. But they didn't. And they didn't fire him for a couple reasons. The first, of course, is because a good quarterback is hard to find. But the second is because they knew him, and they believed in his heart that he loved God and could find that love again. And he did. Roethlisberger rededicated his life to Jesus after a period of backsliding because he knew no other way to break his pattern of misbehavior. So we have Tim Tebow, who knows God and never seems to forget what he can do, while Ben Roethlisberger knew God and knew all that he could do, but somehow lost track of it amidst the fame and fortune. Tebow was a missionary, and Ben Roethlisberger is the prodigal son come home. Well, Jesus came home once, and it didn't go so well. It was a Sabbath day in his hometown of Nazareth, and he was teaching in the synagogue. His friends and neighbors were astonished. Mark 6:3 says, "He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and his sisters live right here among us." They were deeply offended and refused to believe him. They were offended, and they knew him. They knew his family. They had watched him grow up. They knew him, but they knew him as a carpenter. They didn't know him as a teacher. Sometimes we take for granted the people that are closest to us. Verse 5 says that because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them, except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. Jesus could do no miracles because the people lacked faith. They thought they knew him, and they did, but they didn't truly know him. Verse 6 goes on to say that he was amazed at their unbelief. He was amazed. It must have been very, very confusing for him. We expect the people that know us best to believe in us, but they didn't. And the first step in achieving is believing. The people in Jesus' hometown didn't know him, but the disciples must have known him, right? I mean, after all, they spent every single day with him. They witnessed his miracles and his healings. They watched him cast out demons, raise the dead, heal the sick. They must have known him. Go with me for a minute to Mark 6, verse 5. I'll set the scene for you. Jesus is just amazed at the disciples. He seems to be amazed quite often. These men who had spent so much time with him, his homies, if you work with youth, didn't get it, and they had such little faith. So he sends them out in pairs, and he tells them to take nothing with them. No bag, no money, no extra clothing, no bread. So they go out and they do miraculous work. They preach, they drive out demons, they heal the sick. Now we'll skip ahead to verse 30, where the disciples are so excited to come and tell Jesus all the things that they have gone out and done and taught. But they can't because they're surrounded by this big crowd. So Jesus and the disciples, they get in a boat, and they go to what they think is going to be a secluded place, except the people have beaten them there. Now it's late. These people are hungry. The disciples, they just want to rest and talk to Jesus. And so they tell Jesus, they're like, can't you just send these folks away? But he doesn't send the people away. Instead, he tells the disciples to feed them. And there are 5,000 people there. The disciples freak out. They don't have the 7 months' wages it's going to cost to feed these people. They're quite a distance from the nearest village where they could even get food, even if they had the money. And they cannot begin to fathom how they're going to accomplish this task. They have seen this man raise the dead, and they don't think that he can feed 5,000 people. So he asks them, how much food do you have? And they come back, and they tell him that they have 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus has everyone sit down. He raises the fish and the loaves to heaven. He thanks his Father for them. He breaks them, and he gives them to his disciples to distribute to the crowd. Now, after everyone eats, Jesus tells them to collect the leftovers. Because in the ancient days, people were not wasteful. So the disciples do that. They come back and they have 12 baskets of bread and fish. That is so amazing to me. I would have loved to have been there to see this, because these people who didn't even think he could feed them now went out and collected leftovers. Now let me take a minute to tell you about how things work in my world. Because in my world, if I need cookies for the youth on Sunday, I might go to Kathy and say, Kathy, you know what, I could really use some cookies for Sunday. Could you make me some cookies? And she'll say yes, because she's nice that way. And she'll make these cookies, and they will be fantastic cookies. So the next time that I need cookies for youth, who do you think I'm going to call? I'm going to call Kathy. One reason is because now my secret's already out, and she's the only one that will do it. But the other one is because I know that she can make good cookies. So I'm probably going to go to her the next time I need a cake, because I'm going to think, you know what, if she can make good cookies, she probably can make a darn good cake too. Now Jesus' homies, who have spent every day with him and have seen all that he can do, they should have enough faith to know that he can at least do the things he's already done, right? The things they've seen and experienced with their own eyes. So once they've seen Jesus doing something like Kathy making cookies, they should know that he could do them again. And not only that, but like I was going to ask Kathy to make a cake, they should probably be asking him to do things that they didn't even ever seen him do, right? Wrong. Now we're going to go to Mark 8. Now just a page ago, Jesus fed 5,000 people. Only in Mark 8, it's only 4,000. Again, the disciples freaked out. And they asked Jesus, how are we supposed to find enough food to feed them out here in the wilderness? Again, he asked them, how much food do you have? This time they have 7 loaves. So Jesus takes the 7 loaves, he raises them to heaven, he thanks his Father for them, he breaks them, and he gives them to his disciples to distribute to the crowd, and they eat. This time when they collect the leftovers, they come back with 7 baskets full. Now the disciples knew Jesus. They knew him better than anybody should have known him after spending every single day with him, and even they forgot. They could have asked for cake, but they weren't even sure where to get cookies from. Now I want to go back a little bit to Mark 7, verses 24 through 30, which is the scripture that Karen read to you earlier, and introduce you to a Syro-Phoenician woman. Now there are 3 things working against her. To figure that out, we need to know exactly what it means to be a Syro-Phoenician woman in Jesus' day. First and most obvious, she is a female, which automatically lowered her on the totem pole of importance in the ancient world. Second, she's a Gentile. She's as Gentile can be, which basically means she was not Jewish. She was raised in Greece and was surrounded by paganism. Third, she was born in Syria, Phoenicia. And the reason that's important is because she wasn't born in Israel and then moved to Greece. She was surrounded by paganism her whole life. And because she was so entrenched in paganism, she shouldn't even have known who Jesus was, much less have faith that he could do anything for her. So Jesus is traveling to get away from the crowds. Now if you look at the bottom, there's Jerusalem in Israel, and that's where the Jews are, and that big strip of green is where all the pagans are. And Tyre is that little red dot there. So Jesus is traveling, he's trying to get away from the crowd. So what better place to go than somewhere there aren't likely to be any Jews? So he goes to Tyre and he hides out in the house. But this woman, the Syro-Phoenician woman, hears that he's there. And she goes to him and begs her to rid her daughter of the demon. Now I told you that she had 3 things working against her. There are 2 things in her favor that I haven't told you about yet. And the first is she's desperate. From the Matthew account, we know that she falls at the feet of Jesus and repeatedly asks and begs him to cast the unclean spirit from her daughter. Why is she repeatedly asking him? Because he doesn't answer her. Jesus has remained absolutely silent toward this woman, and she is literally at his feet, begging and pleading him. So when he doesn't answer her, she turns to the disciples, who less than a page ago went out into the world and healed people and cast out demons and preached. And the disciples, they help her, right? No. They look at Jesus and say, can't you get rid of her? She's kind of harassing us. But Jesus doesn't get rid of her. He finally responds to her in verse 27 and says, first, I should feed the children, my own family, the Jews. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to dogs. Now I know in your house when you all make dinner, you prepare a beautiful dinner, you set it on your table and your dogs eat. And then your family comes and eats whatever's left, right? Of course not, that's ludicrous. We make a meal and we set it on the table and our children and our families eat. And then if there's anything left over, then the dogs can have what's left. So what he's telling her is, it's not her time yet. Jesus has come with the good news and blessings, but for Israel first. Her time would have to come, but it would come later. He's saying that he will not heal like the pagan magician she's used to. He wants her to demonstrate faith, especially faith in the supremacy of the true God, which went against all of her pagan beliefs. She fully understands what Jesus is saying and replies, saying, "That's true, Lord. However, she has not yet finished with this opportunity." And this is the second thing that she has going for her. She has faith. And the disciples spent every day with Jesus. She did not spend every day with Jesus, but she doesn't have to. Somehow, she has heard about what he can do, and she has faith in the one true God and knows that he is the only answer for her daughter. So she seizes upon this illustration and uses it for her favor. And she responds to him saying, "But even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps from the children's plates." She knows that even the little dogs get the crumbs. What has she just said to Jesus? She agrees with what he said, but she also knows that even while the children eat the food first, there's always something that falls from their mouths onto the ground for the dogs to eat. She's telling Jesus that she understands he's to go to Israel first, but in the process, she wants a crumb. Jesus responds to her and says, "Good answer. Now go home, for the demon has left her daughter." Now the woman understood that the healing of her daughter from this unclean spirit would be merely a crumb of the blessings that Jesus was offering his children, and that's exactly right. He did come with healings and miracles, but those were the crumbs of what he was offering. He was offering salvation and deliverance for his children, while the Gentiles would receive it later. She knew that this was a very small request to make of the Son of David, the Messiah. She sees what the disciples and many others who knew Jesus did not see. She's been able to fully understand the work of the Messiah. So she goes her way, and her daughter is healed. She knows Jesus, and she knows what he can do for her. But she also she knows that she doesn't need a full portion of what he has for her. She only needs just a small crumb. Now, about a month ago, I was in the office talking to Janice Long, and I was telling her about how worried I was that I was afraid we weren't going to raise enough money to go to Aldersgate, and I was worried about my tuition at my mind. Don't tell Steve. And she looked at me and she said, "You've been to Aldersgate every summer, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes, we have." And she said, "And your tuition's been paid this last 2 years, right?" I said, "Yes." And she looked at me and she said, "Why are you worried?" See, I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten about the things and the provisions that he had done for me. I should have known that he could do it. He's done it before. But instead of remembering who he is, I was focused on who I am. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the wrong I am. I should have known Jesus, and I should not have been worried. And you know what? If the provision wasn't there, then it wasn't meant to be, because it's not about what I want or what the youth want. It's about what God wants. We think we have faith because we can see how God is working in our lives, but that's really not faith at all. If we can see God working in our lives, there's no need for faith. We have evidence in our lives of the love of God, but we don't have faith. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is in the things unseen. The Syrophoenician woman had never seen Jesus or what he could do, but she still had the faith that he could do it. She had faith in the unseen. The disciples saw what Jesus had done every single day. They still didn't have that kind of faith. What about you? Do you trust God to provide the things for you that you've not seen him provide before? Do you see what he's done in your life and have increased faith for a while and then forget? Do you marvel at the provision the Lord has given you and your family and then lack the faith that Jesus is going to provide for your future? He's given you cookies and he can give you cake, but really all you need is just a small crumb. So I ask you, do you know Jesus or do you know Jesus?